There's a reason why the Sennheiser HD800s was and is still a popular headphone among enthusiasts. Close to a decade since its release, even longer for the OG HD800 if you consider that, it's still at the top of the chain for soundstage and imaging, which in my opinion are two qualities that can wow people. The HD8xx, released in 2022 as a collaboration product by Sennheiser and Drop, was an even more compelling option, since it's cheaper than the HD800s and is said to be less bright, which is what most of the complaints are for the original variant. So if you've been looking to get the HD800s, should you get the cheaper HD8xx instead? I think the easy answer is yes, but let's discuss that in more detail in this video. The HD8xx comes largely in the same packaging as the HD800s with the exception of an additional cable. The build is likewise identical except for the subtle blue ring color in the cups, which isn't that noticeable really. Build is mostly plastic, but good plastic. Holding it, you feel it's not something you have to be delicate with. Cable length is sufficiently long for home listening use and is wrapped in a cloth-like material. Pretty nice cable in my opinion. The headband padding and ear pads are velour materials and are roomy enough for any ears. They're not thickest I think, but they don't have to be because the headphone is fairly light at 350 grams. Clamp is also not tight yet feels secure in your head. This is easily A++ in terms of comfort, which I think is overlooked a bit when it comes to full-size open headphones. After wearing it for a couple of weeks, going back to the Utopia or HD1000 gives me a bit of discomfort due to their weight and clamp. It's almost like the HD8xx is saying, you think those headphones are comfortable? This is what real comfort is. And I agree with that. The HD8xx is a very open headphone in case you're not noticing. So it's gonna leak a ton of sound while getting most of the outside noises in as well. In that regard, it makes this headphone purely for intimate listening sessions in a quiet environment. On to the most exciting part, the sound. The HD8xx retains the same soundstage and imaging the HD800s has, but comes back with a tweaked tuning. First off, if you're not familiar with its soundstage and imaging, let's just say it probably still has the best in the business. The stage is wide and instrument placements are impeccable. There is that lightness and spaciousness in its music presentation that is quite unique. Some say it's unnatural and I get where they're coming from, but it's the type of character that you can impress your non-audiophile friends when you ask them to listen to it. Having said that, the drawback for that is subpar dynamics and lack of overall punch and incisiveness. Everything is so effortless that nothing is really smacking you in your face. For me personally, this at times takes away from the overall enjoyment. I am less likely to tap my feet or bang and move my head compared to listening to a more dynamic headphone like the Focal Utopia, for example. The frequency response or tuning is the biggest point of contention for the HD8xx. Without any comparison to the HD800s, the HD8xx has a very slight broad hump in the upper bass and lower mids area and a steep scoop in mids and upper mids area. So in effect, it gives this slightly boomy bass, rich low mids, and upper vocals sounding muffled with strings lacking bite or incisiveness. I characterize it as a in-tunnel type of sound, while others say it's like having a cloth draped over the music. Now bringing back the HD800s for a quick comparison, the HD8xx, for lack of a better word, is more musical in the sense that it doesn't sound too thin in the low mids nor is too bright up top. I would think that the HD800s is still the better tuned headphone for audiophiles, but those who want a warm sound will definitely prefer the HD8xx. The biggest complaint about the HD800s is that it's pretty clinical and still sterile when purely used for music listening. It's like you have to wholeheartedly accept it at its own terms first before you can start appreciating its strengths. So the HD8xx attempted to improve the tuning, but it's just gone a bit too much. And so in comes the EQ to the rescue. I don't religiously follow the Harman or any target curve, but I use it as a guideline. What I found is that if I can bring up the scoop upper mids a bit, just a bit, and add a bit of bass shelf, that gives me a sound that I very much like. The slight lift around the 1.5 to 2.5 kHz gives more life to that area, and the increased sub-bass shelf kind of lessens the bloomy bass effect. I didn't even bother reducing the extra warmth around the upper bass and the lower mids area. Now, I spent countless of hours experimenting with EQ for this headphone. I followed Oratory's EQ to the T, but the sound is really just not pleasant. I reduced the bloomy upper bass and it made the overall listening less warm and less enjoyable. The upper mids drop a la Hi-Fi Man or ZMF is actually something that I like, so I just added a couple of dBs and it was great. I didn't attempt to fully fill out the gap. With EQ, I was able to get my preferred tuning and benefit from all the technicalities the HD8xx carries. Soundstage, imaging, detail retrieval, you name them. What if I don't EQ? What if I don't want to EQ? I actually understand not wanting to EQ as I personally feel there's value in listening to headphones in their stock sound. However, you also want to get the best possible sound from your headphone. If you're one of those who say, I don't want my headphones to sound the same, well, they're not gonna sound the same regardless. That's why I don't strictly follow the Harman curve, because I want the unique characters of my headphones to still stand out. So if you can, utilize EQ. And this is coming from me who has listened and even enjoyed the HD8xx in its stock sound, but just making those small tweaks made it even more enjoyable for me. Now, if you can only have one megabuck headphone and don't want to EQ at all, it becomes much harder to recommend the HD8xx. Perhaps if you like warm and relaxed sound with exceptional stage and imaging, it could maybe work. Maybe. Now on to amplification. The HD8xx is a 300 ohm headphone, so it's recommended that you get an amplifier to get the most out of it. It is surprisingly not hard to drive though, as it can reach a pretty good volume out of a headphone out and the sound is not too far. Subjectively, the tunnel character is more pronounced when unamped. I use a Luxman P1U because that's what I have, and for me, it sounds perfect. The P1U and the HD800, HD800s have always had great synergy, so I'm pretty happy with the pairing. But I've also tried it with the THX887 from Monoprice, which is a neutral bright amplifier, and it also sounded great. I think any good, clean sounding amplifier would be sufficient for the HD8xx. If you want to splurge up, you can also do tubes, because it's going to benefit being a high impedance headphone. I don't have any tube amplifiers in my possession, so I can't really speak about that in this review. In conclusion, I think there are plenty of ways you can look at the HD8xx as a product in this market. You can say it's the cheapest way to an HD800s. Yes, the HD800 is still there, but it's an old product by now, so I think it'd be tougher to get a used version where you don't have to worry about its mileage. Plus, the HD800 has an annoying treble peak that it's hard to remove even with EQs, so you'll have to rely on modding it physically or finding one that's already modded. If the HD800s is completely out of context, you can say the HD8xx is the best sound staging and imaging headphone for its price. I know the Hi-Fi Man egg-shaped cans are also pretty good, but the Sennheiser's stage presentation is just different. It's wider and instrument placements are more localized, whereas the Hi-Fi Mans are more diffused in the air and somewhat taller due to its cup size. So if you're like me, a cheapo looking for an HD800s stage and imaging specifically and don't mind doing EQ, I'd recommend the HD8xx in a heartbeat if you can find one. I did get this headphone for roughly $650 in a used market, and I can see it's priced similarly on Headphone Marketplace as of this review. That being said, is there a value in getting this over the HD800s if price difference is not much or price is not an issue? I can't really say. Here in the Philippines, there's not too many used HD800s floating around, and even if they do, the price is still quite expensive. So it depends on where you're at and the product's availability in your location. That's about it for the HD8xx by Sennheiser and Drop. I hope this video has been helpful if you're considering getting this headphone and you're at a crossroads. Thumbs up the video if you like it, subscribe for more headphone.ph video reviews, and visit headphone.ph for the text version of this review. I'll catch you in the next one.